Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the show. Today, we're diving into one of the most powerful ways to elevate your career and assert your value in everyday conversations. Now, I know we often think of owning your voice in the context of big moments, presentations, high-stakes meetings, things like that. But let me tell you something. It's the day-to-day moments where you really build your influence. In this episode, I'm going to share actionable tips that will help you assert your value naturally in any conversation, whether that's a quick hallway chat, a one-on-one with your boss, or even a lunch break with your colleague. Trust me, every single conversation is a chance to elevate your visibility and keep your work on top of mind for the people who need to see it. By the end of today, you'll walk away with specific techniques you can start using immediately to showcase your worth, advocate for yourself, and set yourself up for future success. So grab a notebook or your favorite note-taking app, and let's jump in. Welcome to I Think You're Muted, the podcast empowering professional women to step up, speak out, and be heard. I'm Dr. Stephanie Dean, and after hearing I Think You're Muted one too many times in meetings, I realized many of us are living our lives on mute. Your voice is your most powerful tool, and in each episode, you'll get the strategies and stories to help you find it, overcome challenges, and lead with confidence. Ready to turn up the volume on your impact? Let's dive in. Before we dive into the actionable tips, I really want to spend a moment grounding us in why this topic matters so much and why it can feel uncomfortable for so many of us. Owning your voice, whether it's in big meetings or casual conversations or daily check-ins, it's not vanity. Let me repeat that because I know some of you may have already felt that little twinge of resistance. It's not vanity. It's necessary. But I get it. So many of us have been conditioned to downplay our accomplishments. We've been taught that talking about ourselves, especially in a positive light, is somehow self-centered or too much. We've been told that if we're good enough, people will notice, that our work will speak for itself. But here's the hard truth. That's not how it works. The reality is, in most workplaces, I hate to say it, your work can't speak for itself. It needs a voice. And that voice, that's yours. If you're not the one sharing your value, people won't magically know what you've been up to or how much impact you've had. I've had to learn this one the hard way. Now I want to pause here and validate something important. It's okay if this feels uncomfortable. In fact, it's normal, especially if you're someone who's used to being more behind the scenes, or you've internalized this idea that your work will be noticed without you having to speak up. The discomfort doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're growing into something new, right? So let's break this down for a moment because I know a lot of you might be feeling the resistance bubbling up right now. Talking about your accomplishments can feel awkward because, one, cultural conditioning. Many of us, especially women, have been conditioned to be modest, to put others before ourselves, and to wait for recognition instead of seeking it. We're often told from a young age that being too vocal about our strengths might come off as arrogant or self-centered. And the truth is, women often do face more scrutiny than men when they assert themselves or take credit for their own work. Does that sound familiar? The next one is fear of judgment. There's often a fear of being judged. Will people think I'm arrogant? Will they roll their eyes if I bring up my achievements? These are valid fears, but they can hold us back from opportunities and recognition that we've worked hard for and we deserve. And then the third one is one that I know you have heard of, and I'm sure you've felt, and you've probably named it, and that is imposter syndrome. That nagging feeling that you're not good enough or that you don't deserve the recognition you're seeking. When you're constantly doubting your own value, it can feel impossible to advocate for yourself, even though you're more than deserving. And another lesson that I've kind of learned the hard way, or I've learned over time, is buying into imposter syndrome actually does is you are teaching other people how you think it's okay to treat you, right? If you treat yourself that way, if you look down on yourself or think that you're not good enough or you don't know what you're doing, you're showing other people that that's what you think. So obviously it must be okay or correct or those assumptions are right. No, it's imposter syndrome. Don't walk it behind you anymore on a leash. So here's the mind shift I want you to make. Owning your voice, it's not about bragging. It's about making sure your contributions are seen and they're valued. And that's essential for your growth, for your career, for your impact. So let's break this down a little bit further because we're all about the action here. Your visibility, it drives opportunities. If people don't know what you're capable of, how can they offer you new projects or promotions or leadership roles or even think about you for those things? So think about it like this. By communicating your value, you're not just advocating for yourself, yourself, you're showing others what's possible when they invest in you. Okay, so next, your achievements matter to the team. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking, oh, this was just a small part of the bigger project, or I don't need to take credit because it was a team effort. But here's the thing, every piece in that team matters. And trust me, if your piece isn't there, you're going to hear about it. When you succeed, your team succeeds. And when you own your contributions, this also inspires others to do the same. It's leadership, not self-promotion. And this in turn builds your confidence. So every time you speak up about your work, you're building a muscle. Confidence is not something we just have, right? You're not born with it. It's not Maybelline. It's something we practice. So by constantly acknowledging your value, you start to shift your mindset. And trust me, the more you do this, the easier it becomes. So let's get real for a second. You might be thinking, but shouldn't my work just be enough? Shouldn't people just notice me without having to talk about it? I get it. I do get it. But here's the thing. Waiting for recognition is a risky game. I'm going to say this again for the people in the back. Waiting for recognition is a risky game. People are busy. Your manager, busy. Your colleagues, busy. They're juggling their own priorities, their own projects, their own goals. It's not that they don't care about what you're doing, but they may not always have the time to dig into the details of your contributions. So if you're sitting back and waiting for someone to come along and recognize your work, yeah, you might be waiting a long time. And that's not because you're not doing valuable work. It's because people don't always know what they don't see. And that's why it's your job to make sure the contributions are seen. So let's do another mindset shift, right? Let's advocate, don't wait. This is the mind shift that I want you to start practicing. You're not bragging, you're advocating for yourself. You're not seeking praise, you're ensuring that your work is recognized. You're not being self-centered, you are ensuring that your contributions are visible and they're valued. Because let me tell you, if you're not advocating for yourself, no one else is going to do it for you. Or as Flula says, if you don't toot your own horn, who's going to toot it for you? And your work, your impact, it deserves to be seen, right? It is a disservice to yourself and to your career if you're hiding in the shadows. I know this can feel daunting, especially if you're used to staying quiet about your accomplishments. But the more you practice this, the more you see it's not about vanity, it's about visibility. And visibility is a key to your growth. So let's pause for a second. I want you to ask yourself, what about this idea feels uncomfortable for me? Is it a fear of judgment? Do you just not want to seem arrogant? Whatever it is, I want you to acknowledge it because that's where we can start that shift. The more we understand what's holding us back, the more power we have to overcome it. So let me share another quick story, and this one is personal. Early in my career, I struggled with the exact same thing. I would put my head down, do great work, and hope somebody would notice. And sometimes they did. But I'll tell you, the opportunities really started flowing in when I began to advocate for myself. It definitely felt uncomfortable at first, trust me. I was raised to be quiet about my wins, to be humble. But the more I practiced sharing my value, the more doors started to open. Opportunities, promotions, leadership roles, big moves, they didn't just come because I worked hard. I mean, granted, you still have to work hard, but they came because I made my work visible. And that's what I want for you, to feel empowered, to take up space, and to be seen for the value that you do bring every day. So here's the last point I want to make before we move into the how-tos. By owning your voice, you're setting a leadership tone. Whether you're in official leadership or not, that's okay. Sometimes you have to lead up. When you confidently speak about your contributions and give others permission to do the same, this creates a culture where recognizing values, that becomes the norm. And that's not just powerful for you, but it also becomes powerful for your entire team and your entire company. So now that we've dug into why this is so important and why it's not vanity, but a necessary part of owning your value, let's dive into the how. How can you start communicating a value or your value in a way that feels natural and confident and impactful? This is where a lot of people get stuck, right? You want to share your wins, but you don't want to come off as boastful. Okay, so we've got a few things here. First of all, let's start with an I statement or an I statement with context. So instead of saying, I completed X, add why it mattered. So something like, I worked on updating our sales process, which streamlined the workflow and helped the team close deals faster. You're still highlighting what you did, but you're also showing how it benefits the team or the company. It's a subtle shift, but it makes a huge difference. So let's try an exercise together. I want you to think of a recent achievement. Maybe it's a project you finished, a client you impressed, or a process you improved. Okay, got it? So now let's add some context to it. What was the impact? How did it help your team? Or how did it help your company move closer to its goal? This is your go-to formula for asserting your value. So I want you to keep it simple, keep it factual, but always tie it back to the bigger picture. So once you've learned to do that, the next thing I want you to work on is to casually bring up your achievements in conversation, casually. So how do you weave these wins into everyday conversations? Because that can be difficult without sounding like a braggart, but it doesn't have to be awkward, right? Think of it like this. When you're catching up with a colleague or your manager, just mention what you've been working on. For example, say something like, hey, I've been working on that report for a client and I'm really excited how it's shaping up. I think it's going to make a big difference in our next pitch. Boom, you've just highlighted your work in a casual conversational way. So here's the challenge for you. The next time someone says, how's it going? Instead of saying good or busy or fine, or at the very worst, oh my God, don't ask. Or ask me when I have a glass of wine in my hand. Try sharing something specific that you're proud of. Use it as an opportunity to keep people in the loop about your contributions. Okay, so third, I want you to ask for feedback, right? This is a powerful tip. I want you to ask for feedback in a way that highlights your initiative. So if you've just wrapped up a project or led a meeting, casually ask your boss or a colleague, hey, what did you think about how I approached X? Is there anything you think I can improve on for the next time? This shows that you're proactive and you're committed to growth, but it also naturally brings attention to the fact that you just took ownership of that task. Okay, so let's take things a step further and talk about framing your value, because this is where you can elevate how you talk about your work. I want you to connect the dots to the business goals. This not only highlights your work, but shows that you're thinking strategically. Leadership, right? For example, I led the team on this initiative, which increased efficiency and helped us meet the Q3 target ahead of schedule. Now, you're not just saying, I did this. You're framing it in a way that shows strategic thinking and alignment with the business objectives. Now, think about one of your most recent achievements. How did that tie into the company's goals? Write this down. This is why I say get a notebook out. Or how did it tie into the company's vision? Try to connect the dots and practice framing it that way. This is such a simple shift, but it positions you as a thoughtful and strategic contributor. So another pro tip, leaders often think in terms of metrics, right? Productivity, revenue. So when you speak their language, that resonates. It's a lingua franca. For example, if you increased your team's efficiency by implementing a new process, you want to say something like, this project cut down on manual hours by 20%, which freed up time for the team to focus on high priority tasks. Now you're speaking in terms that matter to leadership. Now, how do we set ourselves up for future growth? We've got our language working. We've got our mindset shifted. How are we setting ourselves up for future growth? I love this part because it's all about owning your growth and being your own advocate. So when you talk about your achievements, don't just stop there, right? Frame it with a vision for the future. So this is called future-focused framing. So here's an example. I'm proud of how we tackled this project, and moving forward, I'd love to take on a leadership role in similar initiatives to keep improving our processes. This kind of statement shows that you're already thinking ahead, that you're not just celebrating past wins, you're positioning yourself for future opportunities. That goes a long way. I want you to also advocate for what you need. Advocating for yourself isn't just about sharing your wins. It's about knowing how to ask for the resources or the opportunities you need to grow. One thing I always recommend is having a framework to negotiate effectively, whether that's asking for a raise or more responsibility, or even support from your team. I actually have a resource called the Confident Negotiator Toolkit, and that has been my go-to for navigating these conversations. If you're interested in learning more about this, I've got a free guide that'll give you some of the phrases you can start negotiating with. You can go to corvidi.com/worth, WORTH. On that page, you can actually see what you would learn, what the framework is, what the different modules are. It's meant to be a short course that's going to give you a quick win. But finally, let's talk about practice, right? Confidence in communicating your value takes practice, and that's okay. I want you to start with small conversations like team check-ins or casual updates and gradually build up your confidence to advocate for yourself in bigger situations like those one-on-ones with your bosses. So here's a mantra for you. My work is valuable and I'm proud to share it. Let that sink in now. My work is valuable, and I'm proud to share it. You have incredible worth, my friend, and the world needs to hear about it. If you're feeling like you need a little extra support, don't forget to check out the Confident Negotiator Toolkit. Again, that's corvididesign.com/worth. It's been a game changer for so many women, so many of my students looking to navigate negotiations with clarity and confidence. All right, my friends, that's it for today. I hope this episode has empowered you to step up, speak out, and own your value in every conversation. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who could use this advice. So remember, you are powerful, you are worthy, your voice matters, and the world needs to hear it. Until next time, my friends, keep showing up, keep shining, keep owning your power.